Elias Rothschild was born into old money, the scion of a family that had made its fortune in oil during the early 20th century. From his earliest years, Elias was groomed to take over the family business, attending the finest schools and rubbing elbows with the children of other wealthy families. But Elias had a drive that went beyond merely maintaining his family's wealth. He wanted to build an empire of his own. At the age of 25, fresh out of Harvard Business School, Elias made his first real estate investment, purchasing a rundown apartment complex in Los Angeles. Where others saw blight, Elias saw opportunity. He renovated the building, raised the rents, and flipped it for a substantial profit. This became his modus operandi, and over the next 3 decades, Elias built Rothschild Real Estate into one of the largest property development companies on the West Coast. Elias's business acumen was matched only by his ruthlessness. He became known for his aggressive tactics, often buying out small property owners through a combination of lucrative offers and thinly veiled threats. His employees feared and respected him in equal measure, knowing that he demanded nothing short of perfection. As Elias's wealth grew, so did his appetite for the finer things in life. He collected rare wines, drove the latest luxury cars, and divided his time between a Bel Air mansion and a beachfront villa in Malibu. But despite all his success, Elias found himself increasingly lonely as he entered his 6th decade. His first marriage, to Vivian Astor, had ended in a bitter divorce after 10 years, with Vivian citing Elias's workaholic tendencies and emotional unavailability as reasons for the split. A second marriage, to former model Adriana Kovich, lasted barely 2 years before ending in another costly divorce. After that, Elias swore off marriage, preferring instead to date a string of younger women who were attracted to his wealth and power. It was during this period that Elias discovered the world of sugar dating. Here, he found an arrangement that suited him perfectly. Young, beautiful women who were willing to provide companionship and intimacy in exchange for financial support. Elias cycled through several sugar babies, never letting any of them get too close, always maintaining control of the relationship through his wealth. But as Elias approached his 60th birthday, he began to feel the weight of his years more acutely. He looked in the mirror and saw a man who had achieved everything he had ever wanted in his professional life but whose personal life was empty. He longed for a deeper connection, for someone who could make him feel young again. It was in this state of mind that Elias Rothschild first laid eyes on Zara Fontaine. The moment he saw her, young, beautiful, with a spark of ambition in her eyes, he knew he had to have her. What Elias didn't realize was that in pursuing Zara, he was setting in motion a chain of events that would lead to his downfall and forever tarnish the Rothschild name he had worked so hard to elevate. Zara Fontaine's story began far from the glitz and glamour of Los Angeles, in the small town of Oaks. Born to a struggling single mother, Zara learned early on that life was rarely fair and that beauty could be both a blessing and a curse. Zara's mother worked as a waitress at the local diner, barely making enough to keep a roof over their heads. Zara's father had disappeared before she was born, leaving behind nothing but a name on a birth certificate and a hole in Zara's heart. As Zara grew older, she watched her mother cycle through a series of boyfriends, each one seeming to take a little more of Lila's spirit. Despite the challenges at home, Zara excelled in school. She was bright and charismatic, with a natural talent for performance that made her the star of every school play. Her teachers saw potential in her, encouraging Zara to dream big and aim for college. But as high school graduation approached, the harsh reality of their financial situation became clear. There was no money for college, no savings to fall back on. Determined to escape the cycle of poverty she had grown up in, Zara made a bold decision. With nothing but a backpack full of clothes and the money she had saved from her part-time job at the local movie theater, she boarded a bus to Los Angeles, dreams of stardom filling her head. The City of Angels, however, proved to be far less welcoming than Zara had imagined. She quickly discovered that thousands of other young women shared her dreams, all competing for the same limited opportunities. Zara found work as a waitress, just like her mother. But the meager pay barely covered the rent for the tiny studio apartment she shared with two other aspiring actresses. As weeks turned into months with no big break in sight, Zara's optimism began to fade. She was on the verge of giving up and returning to Oak Ridge when a chance encounter changed everything. At the upscale restaurant where she worked, Zara served a table of young women who seemed to exude wealth and confidence. As she cleared their plates, she overheard them discussing their arrangement and the gifts they had received from their daddies. Intrigued and desperate for a way out of her financial troubles, Zara struck up a conversation with one of the women after her shift. The woman, Destiny, introduced Zara to the world of sugar dating. She explained how young, attractive women could meet wealthy older men who would provide financial support in exchange for companionship. At first, Zara was hesitant. It felt too much like the life her mother had lived, dependent on men for survival. But as Destiny showed her the designer clothes, the luxury apartments, and the opportunities that came with being a sugar baby, Zara's reservations began to crumble. With Destiny's help, Zara created a profile on an exclusive sugar dating website. She chose her most flattering photos, crafted a witty bio, and waited. Within days, her inbox was flooded with messages from potential sugar daddies. But one message stood out from the rest: an invitation to attend a charity gala as the guest of one Elias Rothschild. Little did Zara know that accepting that invitation would set her on a path that would end in tragedy, forever altering the course of her young life. The hotel ballroom glittered with chandeliers and the jewels of Los Angeles' elite on the night Zara Fontaine and Elias Rothschild first met. Zara, dressed in a borrowed gown and feeling out of her depth, scanned the room nervously until her eyes locked with those of a distinguished older man making his way toward her. "Elias, I presume?" Zara's voice trembled slightly as she extended her hand. Elias took it, his grip firm and confident. "The pleasure is all mine, Miss Fontaine." He guided her into the ballroom with a gentle hand on the small of her back, and Zara felt a shiver run through her body. Whether from excitement or apprehension, she couldn't tell. As the evening progressed, Zara found herself captivated by Elias. He was charming, witty, and seemed genuinely interested in her aspirations. When she mentioned her struggles to break into acting, Elias's eyes lit up. "I have connections in the industry," he said. "Perhaps I could make a few introductions." By the end of the night, Zara's head was spinning. Not just from the champagne but from the possibilities Elias represented. When he invited her to dinner the following evening, she accepted without hesitation. Their courtship, if it could be called that, moved at a whirlwind pace. Elias wasted no time in showering Zara with gifts and experiences she had only dreamed of. A week after their first meeting, he presented her with a key to a luxury apartment in West Hollywood. "You need a proper place to live if you're going to pursue your career," he explained as Zara stared in disbelief at the spacious, sunlit rooms. Designer clothes filled her new closet, and a gleaming sports car sat in her designated parking spot. And Elias's Black American Express card found its way into her wallet for emergencies. Zara felt as though she had stepped into a fairy tale, with Elias as her fairy godfather, granting her every wish. But fairy tales often have a dark side, and Zara would soon discover the price of Elias's generosity. With each gift, each opportunity he provided, the invisible strings binding her to him grew stronger. Elias began to dictate her schedule, insisting she be available whenever he called. He questioned her friendships, particularly with young men, his jealousy thinly veiled behind concerns for her reputation. Zara, intoxicated by her new lifestyle and grateful for Elias's support, initially brushed off these red flags. It wasn't until much later that she would realize the true cost of allowing Elias Rothschild into her life. For the first few months, Zara Fontaine felt as though she was living a dream. Elias Rothschild opened doors she never imagined possible, introducing her to influential people in the entertainment industry and bankrolling her acting classes at the prestigious Theatre and Film Institute. Their first major trip together was to Paris, where Elias booked the royal suite at the Ritz. Zara, who had never been outside of the United States, was overwhelmed by the luxury and history surrounding her. As they strolled along the Seine, Elias surprised her with a Cartier love bracelet, deftly locking it around her wrist. "This is a symbol of our connection, my dear," he murmured, his eyes intense. "I hope you'll never take it off." From Paris, they jetted to the Maldives, where they spent lazy days in an overwater bungalow. Zara marveled at the crystal-clear waters and the schools of colorful fish swimming beneath their glass floor. In the evenings, as they dined on freshly caught seafood, Elias regaled her with stories of his business triumphs, and Zara found herself drawn into his world of power and high-stakes negotiations. Back in Los Angeles, Zara's transformation continued. Gone was the small-town girl from Oregon. In her place stood a polished, sophisticated young woman who turned heads wherever she went. Elias delighted in showing her off at industry events, proudly introducing her as "my Zara" to his business associates and friends. For Zara, the attention was intoxicating. She began to rely on Elias not just for financial support but for emotional validation as well. His approval became paramount, his disappointment devastating. When she landed her first small role in a television series, it was Elias she called first, eager to hear his praise. As for Elias, he found himself becoming increasingly possessive of Zara. He reveled in her youth and beauty, feeling rejuvenated in her presence. He began to rearrange his schedule to spend more time with her, canceling business meetings to surprise her with impromptu lunch dates or shopping sprees. In the early days of their arrangement, Zara found herself both nervous and excited by Elias's experienced touch. Their first intimate encounter was a mix of awkwardness and passion, with Elias taking the lead and Zara following his cues. Despite the significant age difference, Zara was surprised by the chemistry they shared behind closed doors. As their relationship progressed, their physical connection deepened. Elias prided himself on his ability to please Zara, lavishing her with attention and affection in the bedroom. For Zara, these moments of intimacy were complicated, a blend of genuine pleasure and the underlying knowledge that this was part of their arrangement. Even as she began to have doubts about their relationship, Zara couldn't deny the physical attraction that lingered between them. But beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect arrangement, currents of tension were beginning to swirl. Zara, while grateful for everything Elias had done for her, sometimes felt suffocated by his constant presence and demands on her time. And Elias, despite his outward generosity, harbored a growing fear that Zara would eventually leave him for someone younger. Neither of them realized it yet, but the honeymoon phase of their relationship was drawing to a close, and storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. As summer turned to fall, subtle changes began to creep into Zara and Elias's relationship. The initial excitement of their arrangement started to be replaced by a growing sense of routine and, on Zara's part, restlessness. Zara's acting career, despite Elias's connections, was progressing slower than she had hoped. The small role she had landed led to a few auditions, but nothing substantial materialized. She began to wonder if her association with Elias was actually hindering her progress, as whispers of "sugar baby" followed her around casting offices. One crisp October morning, Zara decided to treat herself to breakfast at a trendy cafe in West Hollywood. As she sipped her latte, a handsome young man at the next table struck up a conversation. His name was Jasper Reeves, a 22-year-old film student. Jasper's easy charm and shared passion for cinema drew Zara in, and before she knew it, hours had passed in animated discussion. For the first time in months, Zara felt a spark of genuine connection. Jasper saw her as an equal, not as an accessory or a project. When he asked for her number, Zara hesitated only briefly before giving it to him, justifying it to herself as networking. Over the next few weeks, Zara found herself texting Jasper frequently. They met for coffee again, then for drinks. Each time, Zara told herself it was innocent, just a friendship, but deep down she knew she was treading on dangerous ground. Elias, meanwhile, was not blind to the changes in Zara. He noticed her increased distraction, the way she guarded her phone, the vague explanations for her whereabouts. His previous marriages had taught him the signs of a wandering eye, and his jealousy, always simmering beneath the surface, began to boil over. One evening, as they dined at Elias's mansion, he confronted her. "Who is he?" Elias's voice was calm, but his eyes were cold. Zara, caught off guard, stammered a denial, but Elias pressed on. "Don't lie to me, Zara. I've seen the way you've been acting. Remember everything I've done for you." The argument that followed was their worst yet. Zara, feeling cornered, lashed out, accusing Elias of treating her like a possession. Elias, his composure cracking, reminded her of her humble beginnings and implied she would be nothing without him. In the days that followed, an uneasy truce settled over them. Elias redoubled his efforts to keep Zara close, with surprise gifts appearing daily and impromptu trips planned. But Zara felt increasingly trapped. The luxury that had once thrilled her now felt like a gilded cage. It was during this tumultuous time that Zara made a fateful decision. After another heated argument with Elias, she called Jasper. Hearing his voice, warm and free from judgment, Zara broke down. She confessed everything. Her arrangement with Elias, her growing unhappiness, her fear of leaving. Jasper listened patiently, then made a suggestion that would change everything. "Leave him. Come stay with me. We'll figure it out together." As Zara hung up the phone, she felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. She knew what she had to do, but she had no idea of the deadly consequences her decision would set in motion. The day Zara decided to leave Elias dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil roiling inside her. She had spent the night packing a small bag, carefully selecting items that were hers from before Elias, leaving behind the expensive gifts and designer clothes. Her hand shook as she penned a note explaining her decision, her tears smudging the ink. Zara had planned to leave while Elias was at work, avoiding a confrontation she wasn't sure she was strong enough to handle. But as she walked towards the door of the West Hollywood apartment, it swung open, revealing Elias, his face usually carefully composed was a mask of fury and hurt. His voice was low and dangerous. Zara's heart raced as she realized he must have had her followed, must have known about her plans. She straightened her spine, summoning every ounce of courage she possessed. "Yes, I'm leaving. This isn't working anymore." What followed was a verbal battle that shook the foundations of their relationship. He alternated between rage and pleading, accusing Zara of using him, then begging her to stay. He promised to change, to give her more freedom, to support her career without strings. When that didn't work, he resorted to threats. "You'll never work in this town again," he snarled. "I'll make sure of it." Zara, despite her fear, stood her ground. She told Elias about Jasper, about her desire to live a normal life, to find love with someone her own age. With each word, she watched Elias's expression darken, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. In a last desperate attempt to make her stay, Elias grabbed Zara's arm, his grip painfully tight. "You're making a mistake," he said. "You're nothing without me. No one will ever love you like I do." For a moment Zara wavered. The fear of the unknown, of losing everything she had gained, nearly overwhelmed her. But then she thought of Jasper, of the possibility of a life lived on her own terms. With a strength she didn't know she possessed, she wrenched her arm free. "Goodbye, Elias," she said firmly, walking past him and out the door. As the door closed behind her, Zara didn't see the change that came over Elias's face. The hurt and anger drained away, replaced by a cold, calculating look. In that moment, as he watched the woman he believed he loved walk out of his life, Elias Rothschild made a chilling decision. If he couldn't have Zara, no one would. In the days following Zara's departure, Elias Rothschild's mansion became a fortress of solitude. He canceled meetings, ignored calls, and retreated into a dark world of whiskey and obsession. His mind raced with images of Zara in Jasper's arms, her laughter, once his joy, now a tormenting memory. As the initial shock wore off, Elias's thoughts turned from self-pity to revenge. He had built an empire from nothing, bending the world to his will. He refused to let a 19-year-old girl and her college boy lover destroy him. Elias began to plan, meticulously and with cold precision. He knew he couldn't do the deed himself. He had too much to lose. He needed someone expendable, someone who could make the problem disappear without it being traced back to him. Through discreet inquiries in the darker corners of his business world, Elias made contact with a man known only as Dante Wolf. Wolf was a ghost, a former military operative turned hired gun, known for his efficiency and discretion. Their first meeting took place in the basement of an abandoned building Elias owned downtown. Wolf, a scarred, muscular man with dead eyes, listened passively as Elias laid out his requirements. "It needs to look like an accident," Elias insisted. "No connection to me whatsoever." Over the next week, Elias fed Wolf information about Zara's habits, her new address, her daily routines. He had hired a private investigator to track her movements, and now that information would serve a deadly purpose. The final detail was timing. Elias wanted it done quickly, but Wolf counseled patience. Rushing would increase the risk of mistakes, of leaving evidence. They needed the perfect opportunity, a moment when Zara would be alone and vulnerable. That opportunity presented itself sooner than expected. Through his sources, Elias learned that Zara had landed a small role in an independent film shooting in a remote area of Los Angeles. She would be driving there alone, taking Mulholland Drive late one night after a day of auditions. When Elias relayed this information to Wolf, the hitman nodded grimly. As Wolf left to make his final preparations, Elias poured himself another drink. Staring out over the twinkling lights of Los Angeles, he thought of Zara, of her smile, her dreams, her betrayal. For a moment his resolve wavered. Was he really going to go through with this? But then he imagined her with Jasper, young and in love, building a life without him. His grip tightened on the glass until it shattered, shards digging into his palm. He barely noticed the pain or the blood. His decision was made. Zara Fontaine had to die. The evening of July 15th was unusually cool for Los Angeles. A light fog rolling in from the ocean and shrouding the city in a ghostly mist. For Zara Fontaine, it was a day filled with promise and nervous excitement. She had spent the afternoon in a callback audition for a supporting role in a major studio production, and the director had hinted that the part might be hers. As she left the studio, Zara's first instinct was to call Elias and share her news. Her finger hovered over his name in her contacts before she caught herself, the habit of months not easily broken. Instead, she called Jasper, her heart lifting at the sound of his encouraging words and genuine excitement for her potential break. "Jasper, I wish you could come with me tonight," Zara said as she climbed into her car. A modest Honda Civic that felt like freedom after months of being chauffeured in luxury vehicles. But Jasper had a major project due for his film class and couldn't make the trip to the shooting location. "Drive safe," he told her. "Call me when you get there." As Zara set out on Mulholland Drive, the winding road dark and misty before her, she felt a sense of unease settle over her. She chalked it up to nerves about the shoot and the lingering fear that Elias might try to sabotage her fledgling career. She turned up the radio, singing along to distract herself from her darkening thoughts. Meanwhile, Dante Wolf was already in position. He had scouted the route meticulously, identifying the perfect spot for what would appear to be a tragic accident. A sharp turn with a steep drop-off, the guardrail mysteriously weakened. All it would take was a nudge at the right moment. Wolf sat in his nondescript black SUV, engine idling, watching the road with the patience of a predator. When he saw the headlights of Zara's Civic approaching, he pulled out slowly, falling into place behind her. Inside her car, Zara noticed the SUV in her rearview mirror. A flicker of unease passed through her as she realized how alone she was on this isolated stretch of road. She pressed down on the accelerator, eager to put some distance between herself and the other vehicle. Wolf matched her speed easily, drawing closer. Just before the fateful turn, he made his move, accelerating hard and clipping the rear of Zara's car. The Civic fishtailed, tires screeching as Zara fought for control. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed she might recover. But then the car hit the weakened section of guardrail. The world tilted and spun as the Civic plunged down the hillside. Zara's scream was cut short as the car rolled, metal crumpling, glass shattering. When it finally came to rest at the bottom of the ravine, an eerie silence fell. Wolf pulled over and peered down at the wreckage, satisfied that no one could have survived the crash. He pulled out a burner phone. "It's done," he said simply before tossing the phone over the cliff to join the wreckage. But fate seemed to have other plans. As Wolf drove away, confident in a job well done, he didn't notice the faint movement in the twisted metal below. Zara, barely conscious and badly injured, was alive. Through a haze of pain and confusion, Zara managed to pull herself from the wreckage. She knew she needed help, but her phone was shattered, useless. With no other option, she began to crawl, each movement agony, driven by a primal will to survive. As dawn broke over Los Angeles, a jogger would make a gruesome discovery. Zara's battered body, barely clinging to life, half hidden in the underbrush beside Mulholland Drive. The discovery. Here's the article with added punctuation. The investigation that would unravel the dark secrets behind her accident and expose the deadly obsession of one of LA's most powerful men was set in motion. Detective Imogen Watson arrived at the scene as the first rays of sunlight were breaking through the morning mist. Watson was a rising star in the LAPD, known for her keen eye and relentless pursuit of the truth. As she surveyed the crash site, something nagged at her instincts. The skid marks on the road, the damage to the guardrail. It all seemed too neat, too perfect for a simple accident. Her suspicions deepened when she learned the identity of the victim. Zara Fontaine, miraculously still alive but in critical condition, was no stranger to the gossip columns. Her relationship with Elias Rothschild had been fodder for tabloids for months. Now, with Zara fighting for her life, Watson couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. The detective's first stop was the hospital. Though Zara was in a medically induced coma, the doctors provided crucial information. The pattern of her injuries, they said, was inconsistent with a simple car crash. There were defensive wounds on her arms, suggesting a struggle had taken place after the initial impact. Watson's next move was to interview Jasper Reeves, the last person known to have spoken with Zara. The young film student was distraught, blaming himself for not accompanying her on the drive. He revealed Zara's fears about Elias, her concerns that he might try to harm her career after she left him. Armed with this information, Watson turned her attention to Elias Rothschild. The mogul presented a calm facade when questioned, expressing shock and sadness at Zara's accident. But Watson noticed the way his hands clenched, the flicker of something dark behind his eyes when he spoke Zara's name. As the investigation progressed, Watson and her team uncovered a trail of evidence. Cell phone records placed Elias near Mulholland Drive on the night of the crash, despite his claim of being home all evening. Financial records revealed a large, unexplained withdrawal from one of his offshore accounts days before the incident. But the real break in the case came from an unexpected source. A small-time drug dealer, arrested in an unrelated case, offered information in exchange for leniency. He claimed to have overheard a conversation in a bar about a hit ordered by a wealthy man on his younger girlfriend. The description he provided of the supposed hitman matched that of Dante Wolf, a name known to law enforcement but never before linked to any specific crime. With this new lead, Watson's investigation kicked into high gear. She delved into Wolf's background, tracing his movements in the days leading up to Zara's accident. Surveillance footage from a gas station near the crash site showed an SUV matching the description of Wolf's vehicle. As the pieces began to fall into place, Watson felt the familiar rush of a case breaking open. But she knew that connecting the dots between a notorious hitman, a wealthy real estate mogul, and the young woman fighting for her life in the hospital would require more than circumstantial evidence. She needed hard proof, and she needed Zara to wake up and tell her side of the story. The breakthrough in the case came 3 weeks after the crash, when Zara Fontaine finally emerged from her coma. Detective Watson was at her bedside within hours, gently coaxing out the young woman's recollections of that fateful night. Zara's testimony proved to be the missing piece of the puzzle. She remembered the black SUV following her, the deliberate collision that sent her car over the edge. Armed with Zara's statement, Watson moved swiftly. A warrant was issued for Dante Wolf's arrest, and a SWAT team apprehended him at a safe house in the desert. Under intense interrogation, Wolf finally cracked, revealing the details of his arrangement with Elias Rothschild. Wolf's confession led to a raid on Elias's mansion. There, hidden in a secret safe, detectives found damning evidence. Detailed plans of Zara's route the night of the crash, correspondence with Wolf, and financial records of the payment for the hit. Elias was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Dante Wolf, in exchange for his testimony, received a reduced sentence of 25 years. Zara, still recovering from her injuries, found solace in Jasper's unwavering support and the knowledge that justice had been served.